The more I collect watches, the more I understand watches, the more I sort of get involved in this watch journey that I seem to be on, the more I come to understand that there should be one watch in the collection that I consider a fun watch. It has become more and more important as I've gone down this journey, having that one fun watch in the collection. And when I say fun watch, I actually mean quite a few different things. Today, I want to share with you 6 fun watches, 6 completely different watches that I consider to be fun watches that might be worthwhile having in your collection. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches, and I'm talking about something that I think is really important to have in your collection. At least I'm certainly now understanding that it has to be in my collection, at least one of these watches, a fun watch. But what do I mean by that? Because I'm not sure if fun watch is really the correct term for this, it's just what I call it. What a fun watch is to me is a watch that I look down on and that I just instantly have a big smile on my face. But it's a little bit more than that. It's almost like a childish enthusiasm for that watch, a sort of inner child giggling and just being excited about a watch. That's the idea, because there's other watches in my collection that I look at and I smile because I love them so much, but it's a bit more than that. It is that sort of inner child. That's really the only way that I can sort of describe it. And I think you'll know what I sort of mean by that. But I think this sort of idea of a fun watch can mean a lot of different things, which is why today I'm going to share with you my idea of 6 watches, 6 completely different watches that I consider to be fun watches. Now, these can be at all different price ranges as well. Price doesn't really relate to it, but let me explain what I mean, because the first watch that I think on this list that I consider to be a fun watch is one of those Casio vintage reissue watches. And the watch that comes to my mind in this particular idea is the calculator watch. When I see a calculator watch from Casio, it draws me back to my childhood, but it also just makes me smile. I think they just look fun and cool, and they are super affordable. This is the one that I chose. This is the one that I had in my collection. This is my favorite version of the Casio calculator. And it may not be the obvious one, the one that you think of when you think Casio calculator watch, but it's the one that I really like. I really like it because of the look of it. I like it because of the size of it. I like it because of how it sits on wrist, and it just makes me smile. I also particularly like this one because how the bracelet integrates into that watch is a flat end link, which means you can swap the straps out really easily. And unlike a lot of other sort of vintage inspired Casio watches, it has a little bit of size to it, so it actually feels like it sort of has a bit of presence on wrist, and I like that from this particular watch. But as I mentioned, it's more that it's not this specific watch. This is just the one that I like. It's the idea of a Casio sort of vintage, sort of reissue, or maybe not even a reissue, it's just a watch from Casio that has been coming out for a long time. And the calculator watch, and in particular that one, is the one that I choose when I talk about this. But the second watch that I consider to be a fun watch is something that a lot of you may already have in your collection. That is something with a colourful dial. Most of the watches in my collection either have a black dial, a silver dial, and a couple of blue dials, and they are predominantly the watches that I want in my collection. But I don't really consider any of those to be fun watches. But if I make it a really bright colour, that just adds that bit of fun to it. And it doesn't have to change anything else apart from that. It just needs to be a bright, colourful watch. And when I think of bright, colourful dials, there of course are many, many options out there from well-known big brands, but I tend to think about micro brands when I think of colourful dials. And I think of micro brands because they do colourful dials so well. And for me, in particular, the one that has been in my collection most recently is the Erebus Origin. This is a watch I think is really good, it's really well made, it's really good value for money, it's a really nice watch to have on wrist, but perhaps it was missing a little bit of interest factor, which is why I chose the orange dial version of this watch. I'm so glad that I did, because it added that fun factor to me, this nice bright orange. But of course the Origin comes in many other colours too, and lots of other micro brands do this as well. So I tend to think of colourful dials and I link them to micro brands, even though there's plenty of other colourful dials in other watches, especially when it comes to orange dials. But the Origin is the one that comes to mind when I think about colourful dials and fun dials just because of that color. The third one on this list today is what I would consider to be interesting designs. In particular, the case. Something that has sort of been made a little bit different to other watches that you would consider normal classically styled watches. And for me, this also comes down to micro brands sometimes, but also other big brands. But the one that comes to my mind is the Ciga Design Blue Planet. This is a watch that is completely different to other watches that I've had in my collection. It has been designed differently, it is presented differently, it is telling the time differently, it has a different case feel to it, but it's also very well made, and it has been a lovely watch actually to own and enjoy and to look at. And it just makes me smile whenever I see the Blue Planet. The fourth one for me in regards to fun watches is the dial layout, or perhaps even how the functionality of the different complications are on that watch. Something that has been designed in a way that is different to what you would expect. For me, in my collection, there is one particular watch that really stands out for me that is exactly this, and this is my Mont Blanc Nicolas Roussec. A watch that is completely different looking to any other watch in my collection, and it just gives me that big smile on my face whenever I look at this watch. It also goes beyond that because this particular watch is so well made and I enjoy it so much, and it has turned out to actually be one of my most worn watches and one of my favorite watches in my collection. So being a fun watch doesn't just have to be an occasional wear watch. Like this Mont Blanc, it's been one of my most worn watches, and it has become a real central point to my collection. So fun watches can be all sorts of different types of watches, but they also can be really important watches in your collection. Number 5 is a themed watch. And this is going to mean something different for each person that is sort of thinking about this, because when you think of theme, it could be something from a movie, it could be something from your childhood, it could be all sorts of things, but something which is not sort of generally watch related, but also just makes you smile. And that is why I think the things like Snoopy on watches has been so popular, because it's just added this fun element to watches. Just like my Timex Snoopy. It is a very classical sort of vintage style watch, just a really nice watch, but you just add that little element of Snoopy on the dial, and it just gives it this fun factor to it, and it makes me like this watch so much more than I would have any other of the Timex Marlins. In fact, it is the reason why I bought this particular Timex, because I liked that Snoopy feature on it. It just gave me that extra added reason to own this watch, and it made me smile every time I wore it. The last one on this list is a watch design that I never used to like. In fact, I always sort of steered away from them. But as I've collected watches, as I've got to know watches better, I seem to start to understand this design a little bit more and even start to like it. And that is skeleton watches. And skeleton watches, I don't think are always generally thought of as fun watches. You know, there are lots of very expensive skeleton watches out there, like a Zenith that I tried on recently, which is a beautiful watch. But I don't think it was meant to be a fun watch, but I think of it as a fun watch. But when I think of fun watches that are skeleton watches, there's one watch that really stands out in my mind, and that is the Ciga Design Series Z. And I know this is the second Ciga Design that has been on this list today, but I think that's partly what the company does. It creates some really fun, interesting watches that are relatively affordable, but are also very well made. I've also wanted to feature this Series Z today because I think it's actually the best watch from the Ciga Design catalogue. It is one of their more affordable watches, but it is a watch that actually can be worn quite easily, and I really like the design of it. I also wanted to mention it because as a bit of a sneak peek, this watch, this Series Z, is actually going to be one of my upcoming sponsored giveaways. And I think it's an amazing watch that somebody out there is going to win. So stick around, at some point in the future, I'll be doing a video about a next giveaway. It might be a little while, I've got another giveaway going on at the moment, but this Series Z will be the next giveaway. Thanks for watching, guys. I think it's really important, for me anyway, having one of these type of watches in my collection. It really adds to my collection. It really makes me even happier to have a collection of watches and have something like this in the collection. Do you think you have a fun watch in your collection? I'd love to hear what that watch is, because I'm always on the lookout for fun watches, and maybe you might give me some good ideas about what watch to buy next. But whilst you leave that comment, or after you leave that comment, maybe watch one of these videos next.